Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping right into a really high-stakes showdown from Matthew, chapter 21. It's an absolute masterclass in how to handle a hostile conversation, and it all boils down to one critical question. Who's in charge here? Okay, so picture this. The setting is the temple, and Jesus is teaching. All of a sudden, he's confronted with a question that has no safe answer. This isn't just a friendly chat, it's a moment just crackling with political and religious tension. And believe me, every single word is being weighed.
So, we begin right in the heart of Jewish life, the temple in Jerusalem. And you really got to remember the context here. Jesus has just made his big entrance into the city, what we call the triumphal entry, and even more recently, he's caused a huge stir by cleansing the temple courts. The establishment is, well, they are not happy about it.
And that brings us to verse 23, which really sets the stage. As Jesus is teaching, the religious leaders, we're talking the chief priests and the elders, they come right up to him, and they don't ask about a sermon. Nope, they go straight for the jugular with a two-part question. By what authority are you doing all this? And who gave you that authority? To really get the threat here, we have to understand who these guys were. This wasn't just a random group of people. We are talking about the Sadducees, the wealthy, priestly class led by the high priest. They, along with the Sanhedrin, which was basically the supreme ruling council, they controlled the temple. And this is crucial. They only kept that power through a very delicate political balancing act with their Roman occupiers. And their power was tied to a very, very profitable system. The source material actually calls it their gravy train. All that money changing and the selling of sacrifices, that was a whole economic engine that they controlled. So when Jesus overturned their tables, he wasn't just making a spiritual point, he was directly challenging their entire economic and political setup. They saw his actions as a radical, completely unauthorized intrusion.
So, this question was a brilliantly laid trap. If Jesus says his authority comes from God, they can accuse him of blasphemy, a crime punishable by death. If he claims any kind of human authority, they can run straight to the Romans and report him for sedition, trying to start a rebellion. You see, they weren't looking for an answer, they were looking for a charge.
But Jesus doesn't walk into their trap, not even close. Instead of answering directly, he masterfully turns the tables on them and sets a trap of his own. And this is verse 24, he just flips the script completely. He says more or less, I'll answer your question, sure, but first you have to answer one of mine. He proposes a counter question, not to avoid their challenge, but to expose the real motives hiding in their hearts.
Now, Jesus' question isn't just some random thing. It is surgically precise, and it's designed to put these leaders in an absolutely impossible position. It forces them to stop thinking about how to trap him and start worrying about their own political survival.
And his question from verse 25 is just perfect. The baptism of John, where did it come from? Was it from heaven, or was it just from men? He brings up John the Baptist, a guy the common people absolutely revered as a true prophet sent from God. It is the perfect question to ask.
And this slide just brilliantly illustrates the checkmate they were in. The leaders get together, and their reasoning is all politics. It has nothing to do with truth. If they say John's baptism was from heaven, Jesus will immediately ask, well, then why didn't you believe him? Because, of course, John testified about Jesus. But if they say it was just of men, they're in huge trouble because the crowds would be absolutely furious with them.
This reveals their true priority. Their whole debate isn't about what's actually true. It's about which answer is going to cost them the least. The source calls this a calculation of cowardice and hypocrisy. They were more afraid of the people than they were of God, and their number one goal was just to maintain their own control.
So, trapped by Jesus' brilliant logic and their own political games, the leaders are backed right into a corner, and they're forced to admit defeat in the most telling way you could possibly imagine.
The response comes in the first part of verse 27. We cannot tell. Now, this isn't an honest admission that they don't know. Oh no. This is a calculated retreat. It's the only answer they can give that doesn't immediately cost them their power or maybe even their safety.
And because they refuse to take a stand, Jesus, in the second half of verse 27, holds up his end of the bargain. He replies, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things." He doesn't have to. By refusing to answer his question, they've already lost the argument. It is so crucial to understand this moment. Jesus wasn't just being evasive here. He was exposing their hearts. He was demonstrating that they weren't truly looking for the truth because they had already rejected the clearest evidence pointing to him, and that was the testimony of John the Baptist.
So what was the real answer that they refused to see? Where did his authority really come from? It was the authority of the Messianic king, the one foretold by prophets like Zechariah and Malachi. It was an authority demonstrated not by some decree, but by his actions, by healing the blind and the lame right there in the temple courts for all to see.
This whole exchange proves a timeless point. The priests demanded proof of authority, and Jesus gave it to them, not with a direct answer, but by forcing them into a silence that spoke absolute volumes. And it leaves us with this thought: authority isn't always proven by what you say, but sometimes by what your opponents are too afraid to admit.